Gaur Premanande. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol. Hari Bol. I offer my respectful obeisances to my spiritual master, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to all the previous acharyas, and to all the Vaishnavis assembled here today. Vanchakalpataruscha, Kripasinnavevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. And I very specifically, especially offer my obeisances to His Grace Kaustubha Prabhu, who has let me sit next to him on the stage. He's doing so much to give his heart to so many people on a daily basis. And today's an opportunity just to have a conversation about the ways that we can come closer to Krishna. And we'll just have a discussion that we'll start by hearing from Kaustubha Prabhu about anything that's on your mind. That's okay.
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I thought maybe I'd just start by thanking all the devotees that are here that have done so much to make this whole weekend happen. Especially I wanted to, is Jai Shri here? She's not here? Oh, maybe we'll wait till she comes back.
Making it happen.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what it is. But it's been a wonderful chance to meet old friends and to make new friends. And it's really, I suppose, you know, I was going to follow your lead, but you're getting me started, so
You're already going.
yeah, we're already going. So I was thinking, you know, right where we are in Wisdom and Sages, it may be even tomorrow's show, we come to a very special place in Bhagavatam, which is after chapters and chapters building up. There have been many chapters that have, they're chapters that are full of incredible content themselves, but at the same time they're all there to kind of frame a very important conversation, and that's a conversation between Devahuti and Kapila. And now we finally got to that conversation. We've just started it. And but now these amazing, super important verses come out, and Kapila reveals to Devahuti that bhakti is special because it's the generally we think in terms of, when we think of yoga, we think that it involves renunciation and leaving everything, and in one sense even everyone behind. And but he tells her something different. He says that actually he glorifies the path of bhakti yoga, and then he says on this path, one's attachments, usually we're always talking about detachment, but one's attachments actually counter one's spiritual attachments, or really what he says is one's attachments to the sadhus, that they counteract one's material attachments. And then he quotes this very famous verse, which is slipping my mind right now. Tatikshava Karunika, thank you. Tatikshava Karunika, Surya Sarvadehinam, Ajatra Sacha Sauchabhyam, Sadhava Sadhubhushana. These are the Sadhubhushana. Bhushana means the, you can say the ornaments, or the jewels, like the decorations, the beautiful ornaments of the sadhu. These aren't like physical jewels, but these are the most beautiful ornaments, the ornaments that Krishna appreciates the most. It's the ornaments of one's character. And it begins with tolerance, titikshava karunika, and then surita sarvadehinam. Right? When we become a little bit wiser, it means we can be a little bit more tolerant. Things that would upset us in the past don't upset us so much because we're viewing them from a different perspective. These things that used to seem to us to be so important, now we recognize they're not so important actually. Life goes on, and there was really no point in getting so caught up, so upset. And so you become tolerant. And when you become tolerant, when you're not so caught up in everything being just right for you, and you can let go, then you can naturally be more merciful to others. You can think of others more and help others. So karunika, you become compassionate. And when you're thinking in that way, then every single person, Surita Sarvadehinam, you can become a true friend. And not just a true friend to a very narrow group of people, but you can become a true friend to all people, all living entities. So this is where he starts. That he says, if you can become attached to sadhus, then all of your... Devahuti was expressing some fear, that I might pass away still with my attachments and my material fears. And he was saying, this is in problem. When you become attached to the sadhus, it remedies all that. Right? And we all need to have that strategy in life. How will I become one of these sadhus? This is the way that this is my own personal strategy. I'm way behind. I'm way behind schedule. But by the time I die, I would like to be something more like one of these sadhus, right? That where the little things don't bother me, where my mind becomes so disconcerted with everything being the way that I think it should be, so that have all my comforts or all my respect or whatever it may be that my ego's calling for. That I've let go of that, and because I've let go of that, there's a sense of peace, and that peace allows me to be kind to others. And because I'm being kind to others, I'm not getting a lot of tension in my life. And from that state, whatever's coming my way, I hope to be able to perceive it or understand it in the most beneficial way. Now that I'm detached, I can make sense out of everything, understand how Krishna's hand is working in it, understand how I can grow through this. And so that by the time I'm an old man, if I make it there, I can sit and chant my japa with a mind that's able to become fully, deeply absorbed in that name. And so, I think we all have to figure out how we're going to do that. And for me, it's, I've seen that this advice that Kapila Dev has given to Devahuti is probably my only hope, is to hang very tight to sadhus like Vaisesika Prabhu and others. And if my heart can become attached to these great souls, then naturally we begin to let go of the other attachments.
Do you want me to say something?
Please, yeah. No, I would just want you to talk.
Thank you, Kaustubha Prabhu, for starting off on a very rich, what part of Bhagavatam isn't rich? Every verse, every word. But it's a very popular section. It's so practical teachings. And just when you said that, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about, continue the definition of a sadhu. It's 3 words: sadhu, sadhana, and sadhya. So sadhya means a goal. And Vrinda, Radhika, everyone calling you everything. Radhika yesterday was talking about how start with the goal in mind. You normally start with a goal in mind, and then you decide what process you're going to take up to pursue the path. And so the sadhya is the goal. And knowing what the goal is always important in any endeavor. Otherwise, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And then there's a practical way of adjusting one's lifestyle, one's sentiments, and the sea.
Conceptions?
And conceptions. In order to...
I just made that up. I hope it
pretty good.
makes sense.
And that's called sadhana. In other words, adjusting one's life around the principle that I'm going for a goal in my life. So one of the verses that comes to mind, since you brought up this section, that's very practical, in which Kapila Dev describes the way in which one makes advancement most readily, which includes association of devotees, and how does one associate with sadhus, those who are fully engaged towards the goal. And don't mind, but I'll quote some Sanskrit. It's satam pasangam mama virya sambido bhavanti hrit karna rasayana kata Tajjo Shanad Ashwa Pavarga Vartmani Shradaratir Bhaktir Anukramishvati. So this very concise verse talks about the way that sadhus associate with one another, and in this verse, satam means sadhus, or those whose hearts are sincerely dedicated towards the goal. And satam prasangamama virya samvido means that they come together, and the vibration that comes from their gathering, just like this one, everywhere you go on the property, well, there are sadhus here, there's a vibration. You can hear it from the hills, the kirtan, and when you come into this tent, we're talking about Krishna and the means to come to Krishna. And by that vibration, by staying in the vibration and hearing from the hearts, the voices that are emanating the powerful intentions of those sadhus, then one has a transformation. So I have a saying that I picked up from a godbrother a long time ago that essentializes this concept, which is keep the transcendental vibration going. Whatever part of the world I'm in, whatever part of the day in my life, make an arrangement. Think ahead of time, how will I be able to stay in the transcendental vibration? And if I can do that, according to Kapila Dev, then he says, Tajjo Shanad Ashu Apavarga Vartmani, that very quickly the heart will transform. And it takes us on a different trajectory altogether. Right now, I'm in a world that's fraught with various anomalies like birth, death, old age, and disease, represented by the syllables pa, ma, which means that you have to work very hard to maintain your apartment in San Francisco. Then, unless you have rent control, then you can't leave. And then you got pa. That's a pa means you've got to work so hard that foam comes from your mouth. And then ba means that eventually whatever we acquire in the world will slip through our fingers. And pa means we'll be fearful while we're doing it. And ma means death. It's the ultimate perspective changer when death comes. So he says that when you follow this path, then you change that path to apavarga. It means now you're going in a different direction, you're going to the spiritual world. And finally, he says, it'll happen in noticeable stages. Shraddha is the first. Shrad is an active verb. It means where you place something. Shrad means the heart, and da is an active verb, where you place something. So shraddha, which often is translated as faith, means where you're putting your heart. What are you putting your heart into? Could you identify that right now? What are you most putting your heart into? So as we advance in spiritual life, we most put our heart into hearing and chanting the transcendental vibration about Krishna. And then from Shraddha, Rati comes, and this actual affection for Krishna. It's a strong taste. I don't want to be without it, ever. I don't get distracted. And then bhakti means we develop pure love or prema for Krishna.
I'm wondering if we should, do you think we should open it up for other thoughts?
Yeah, I think so.
We thought we'd also just kind of open it up for like a wider discussion if someone maybe has a question or would like to share some thoughts on what we've been discussing or what we've been discussing all weekend. Anyone like to share something? Prabhu?
I have a question, and it's
Do we have another mic?
Your direction. So my question is that, so here we have this beautiful festival, and there's a great big variety of people. Some people are here for the first time experiencing Krishna consciousness. So for someone who's new, who hasn't taken initiation from the Guru, and they want to, they got introduced to the chanting of Hare Krishna, they like it, they like prasadam, they like, what's their next step? Like what should they do to keep the vibration going?
Yes. So, for instance, here, some people have come here, they're very new to the practice of bhakti, but they're excited about it, they're feeling something from it. They're enjoying the association of the Vaishnavas, they're enjoying the chanting, they're enjoying the prasadam. And so what is the next step for them? Oh, yeah. When she's free, we'll invite her over. I suppose it could come in so many ways, but one thing, you know, I'll share something. Even just a few minutes ago, someone asked me, like, how did Wisdom of the Sages get started, this podcast that I do with my friend Rogan? And actually, the place where I have to start is actually I have to thank Vaisesika, because it was really, he did something for me. He's done it for so many people. He encouraged me to read Bhagavatam every day. And that's something that I think I was neglecting in my life. I had them set there, but it was mostly I was reading like as reference, you know, more than like as a sadhana. And so he had that app that you had where you can tell you know.
Still there.
Still there.
Be a
Page by page. And so it's a fascinating idea that you could just like go. It was one of those nice apps that click when you spin the thing, and so you could check. Oh, if I read 40 verses a day from Bhagavatam, I could read the entire thing in a year. Right?
41 pages.
41 pages. But I think it was 40 verses is a year, and I think my wife and I were reading 80 verses a day. I'm not sure if I got that right, but it was something like that. And we were just enjoying it, actually, you know. It was just, we would sit down, and it was kind of, it was relaxing, but it was not only enriching that time that we spent. I think it took us about 40 minutes or so, but it was actually enriching all the rest of the time in the day, too.
Yeah.
And so I got in the habit of that. I was doing it for a couple months or so, and wherever I was going, I felt like your representative. I was like, people say, "So, Kaustubha, what's up? You know, what are you doing?" I'm actually reading Bhagavatam every day, and I said, "Really great. You know, you could do it too. You know," and other people started doing it too. You know, so then Raghunath said, "I have a few students that just want to study with me daily. I want to do something at 5 a.m. On Zoom." Like every day for them. What do you think I ought to do? I said, oh, why don't you do Bhagavatam every day? So he thought about it, he said, okay, I'll do Bhagavatam. And he started doing with just maybe like 8 people or something like that. They would wake up, or they would all be up at 8 a.m., or I'm sorry, 5 a.m. to just be part of that conversation. But it was just all Bhagavatam, that's all it was. And it just kept growing a little bit. He started to show that live on Facebook, like Facebook Live. So then other people started to join it. And then it was 20 people, and then it was 30 people. And then he invited me on as occasional guest. And it continued to grow. So he started in March, and it was gradually growing and growing. And in the summer, I was a guest a couple of times. And I think by September of 2019, I just started coming on. We felt the momentum. The combination was working, and the chemistry was connecting, and so we just started doing it every day, and it was fun. But you know, then it began to sink in how good this is for our spiritual life, and how good this is for everyone else that was participating. And it just kept growing until there was about 80 or 85 people every morning tuning in at 5 a.m. without any advertising. They're putting it up on Facebook Live in the least professional way possible. Raghunath was always like knocking over the phone, and you know, it was kind of a mess. But and so then we said, okay, on the first of the year, January 1st, 2020, we'll launch it as a regular podcast, branded and put it out there. But what we realized is that I've taught Bhakti in different contexts, at different times at the Bhakti Center where I participated in New York. You know, I would line up different weekly things and so on. But actually it was daily. We realized that it's actually when you do something every day that it starts to become firmly rooted. You know, so in answer to your question, I think, first of all, as my wife and I were reading Bhagavatam, realizing the Bhagavatam itself is telling us again and again and again and again and again that if you just do this, if you just hear this Bhagavatam, amazing things will start to happen in your life. You know, Krishna will enter into the holes of your ears, and he'll sit down on the lotus of your heart, and then he'll remove all your lust and anxiety, like when the autumn waters fall onto a pond, and like all the murkiness just like settles down to the bottom, and then you have nice. This will happen if you just take it seriously and do it every day. But I wasn't doing it every day. Why not? You know, why in the world? I was doing so many other things. We all have busy lives for sure, but we all waste time. Most of us waste time too. So we have to find some daily sadhana, and particularly hearing, you know, and particularly hearing Bhagavatam. So that's one answer. I mean, there are other ways someone could answer your question, but I think that's one way to go. And it means you have to have. It goes right back to what Prabhu was saying. You have to have the right sangha, wherein everybody has a similar faith in that Bhagavatam, and everyone has a similar eagerness to keep it sacred, keep this time sacred, keep this process sacred. And when the Vaishnavas get together in that way, then wonderful things manifest.
Can you ask me a question?
Oh, okay. Well, I thought maybe you could
Or maybe
add something to that, but otherwise we can open it up. Yeah.
We'll restate the question if you.
Well, that if someone is new to this and they're catching on to it and they're excited about it, what's a good next step for them?
I see.
What he said. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tesham satati yuktanam vachitam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam vayanti te. And he assures us in various ways in the Gita and elsewhere that he's there to guide us within the heart. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna appearing as a devotee 500 years ago, mentioned that Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagavanji, etc., that when one becomes serious about spiritual life, there's a way in which Krishna makes an arrangement to meet devotees who are teaching in a way that resonates. And I find that the process of spiritual life and finding one's community and guru happens quite naturally by the divine order, by Krishna's arrangement. And there's a sense that those who are starting spiritual life often have, that they realize one day that such and such is helping me. I'm listening and it's actually lifting me up. I'm able to do things like give up bad habits that I wasn't able to do before. I'm actually getting attracted to the process. And then that's a good sign that you're in association that's helping you. And then there are ways in which one can become more connected to gurus to help one in instruction, and then one can also take a step called bhajana kriya, where one approaches guru to dedicate oneself to the process and receive the divine mantra and mantras, the divine name and mantras, so that one can make progress in spiritual life. But it goes back to the basic principle that you're bringing out, which is keep the transcendental vibration going. In fact, one of the essential verses that's given by Rupa Goswami in his book called The Nectar of Instruction. It's nice to get some advice from those who are coming to us from the spiritual world, who are on the highest level. And he says, organize your life around this principle, that you are able to continuously hear, chant, and remember Krishna. And from that, everything else will take place. And I just wanted to mention about this principle that's given in various places in all these teachings, and that is Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, which means you should do this continually. So the great teachers of bhakti have anticipated that might be intimidating for some people. We're working, perhaps, and having to maintain families. What to speak, just maintaining the body takes effort and time. And therefore, it's a Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And one of my favorite devotees, actually, as a kid, he's grown up now and initiated, but I remember him walking right through the class. The great teachers comment that this Nityam Bhagavata Seva means exactly what Kaustubha Prabhu just said, is at least once a day. I find that a day is a compartmentalized unit, and I'm not the same person in the morning when I wake up that I was the night before. Everything gets rearranged. I have to start over, and I can't skip a day. So those who are serious about spiritual life can find a teacher or teachers or community that inspires them to stay on track, at least hearing something and doing a practice once a day. And everything will grow from that process of hearing and chanting. Hare Krishna. See, I said
Thank
what
you.
you said.
That's only because I was following what you exemplified so well. Would anyone else like to share a thought or a question?
Just, if you could, we'll just stimulate the conversation by give a reflection. Questions are very difficult, actually. But if you reflect back any one thing that you heard, a concept, a phrase, that you might take away from here, that you might use later. And if somebody asks you, what were these people talking about in here, what's the one thing that you would say? So just reflect that back, and it'll start a cascade of thoughts and questions.
Any reflections? Radhika.
I just want to say that, like, when I see you, Prabhu, and I see other Prabhupada disciples and how much nishta they have every single day. For me, I'm like, my whole life is just completely anishtita, like unsteady. And when I see Prabhupada disciples, how much nishta they have, I feel so hopeless. Like, how can, like, because there's this new, I don't know if it's my generation that's like, I don't know if it's my generation that
He'll repeat the question.
is so much like, oh, I feel inspired or I don't feel inspired, going off of inspiration. But I see that with Prabhupada disciples, it's like real love. Like, you make your mind up that you're going to do this vrata or this sadhana, and it's relentless. It's every day.
Well, what would be it?
It's every day, and that dedication and that nishta, that even if the inspiration is not there, you're doing it like with Thakurji Seva. When you do Shringar, you make offerings. I remember seeing with my Guru Maharaj, just seeing his Bhagavatam, how he would decorate the slokas with chandan and tulsi and flowers, almost like the Bhagavatam is a deity with so much love. And I just feel, I don't know, like for me, I'm really exhausted of being so unsteady, like of being inspired and then not being inspired and just being constantly unsteady in the bhakti. So I wonder if you could.
I'm going to repeat the question. I'm going to give the microphone to you because this Prabhupada disciple I can So it wasn't so much a question, but she was sharing her heart that she sees Srila Prabhupada's disciples, and they have great nishta, great steadiness. They're very fixed in their practices and their service.
And you too, Prabhu, also.
And at the same time, she feels, I don't have that myself. I feel so unsteady. She gave examples of beautiful types, the beautiful types of service that people do, completely fixed in her Guru Maharaj and so on. And she's feeling exhausted with the fact that I'm trying, but I haven't developed that steadiness yet. That was, I hope I captured at least a good part of what you're saying.
I just bring it back to the section of the Bhagavatam that you mentioned. This is something that, in the context of what Kaustubha Prabhu brought up earlier, from a section of the Bhagavatam that he's reading now, there's a conversation going on between Devahuti, who's a mother of Kapiladev, Krishna, who's incarnated as her son. And she feels a need to ask him questions, and to receive instructions from him. So he agrees and instructs her. So one of the first thing that she says, as you well know, is that I'm sick and tired of being unsteady. I'm sick and tired of the disturbances of my senses. And how do I get over this? And a little bit further along, she says, it seems impossible. It seems like I am my body. The mind is so invested in the external sense objects, and this is confirmed later in the Bhagavatam, the 11th canto. There's a way in which, even as this body manifests out of the womb, the senses have their counterparts in this world. The sense objects are actually there, embedded within the mind. And therefore it seems quite natural. I'm part of this world. I should pursue happiness in the world. So Devahuti is saying, how do I overcome this? It seems insurmountable, the mind. Doesn't it? Anyone?
Yes.
Makes me feel better. So then he answers. I'm going to say the answer, and then I'll have Kaustubha Prabhu embellish it, because that's what he does. Or elaborate. And that he says that stay on the path and here for a long time. So if ever I feel depleted or unsteady, there's one answer, and it was given to me once by my mother. My mother at the time was not a devotee. She wasn't pleased that she wasn't totally against it. She let me become a devotee when I was youngish. And one day, I happened to be at the Los Angeles airport, and I was having a bad day, maybe a bad week even, and I felt a little down. So I called her from a payphone. That's how long ago it was. And I started complaining, as only a son can do to one's mother. And here's what she told me. She said, you listen to me. You get that bag with those beads inside. You put your hand in and you start chanting. And before she left this world, actually, she became a devotee. And I had 5 days with her before she left. And I asked her, hey, Mom, what was that about? How come you told me that? She said, I saw you cross over and leave the material world. I didn't want you coming back again. And so the answer, as Prabhupada said once to Jayananda Prabhu, I don't know what Jayananda Prabhu wrote to Prabhupada, but Prabhupada wrote back, it's the same old answer. He said, chant Hare Krishna. So if you increase the transcendental vibration to whatever degree, even if it's 1/100th of a degree, you'll notice that your life improves by 1/100th of a degree, or more. Actually, it's exponential. You give a little bit more to the hearing process and the practice, and it'll increase from there. And let's find out more from Kaustubha.
Anka has something she'd like to share.
Okay, what I wanted to say too is that some people are hard on themselves and they feel like they're not making advancement, and I can't do the best you can each day. Chanting can be done. There's no hard and fast rules for chanting. You can chant anywhere at any time, and little by little, like your mom said, put their hand in that bead. Chant. So it's so valuable, and don't be hard on yourself. Love yourself, because Krishna's in your heart.
I think that's perfect. And when I'm hearing all this, I'm thinking of one of the great fortunes in my life is I've been able to be close to some Vaishnavas that I have great respect for, feel that they have very deep wisdom. And it's occurred to me that part of what wisdom means is it means recognizing how things grow, how things change and how things grow. And I think that a lot of times wise people, they like to spend time in nature. And they like, anybody that has a garden, I've never been a gardener, but I know when people talk about the gardening, there's something to planting the seed and watering the seed and waiting, and then doing all the little things that need to be done, if it's weeding or protecting it in different ways. And then we see that things grow, and they grow in a variety of different ways. Some things grow straight up and they grow fast, and some things spread out, and some things they take a very long time underground. And if you're looking at that seed, you're just waiting for the day, impatiently waiting. When is it going to change? When is something going to finally show? It's like there's nothing happening here. Even though I put the effort in, there's nothing growing. But if you were able to see under the ground, there's a lot happening down there. And, you know, roots or things are you know, the little. I'm not good with all of the botany and the terms, you know, but there's the shell of that seed is cracked open, and roots are going down, and everything that'll be needed for that plant to fully blossom in a beautiful way is like, it's happening down there, but nobody sees it. And I think that our bhakti practice can be a lot like that too. That, you know, I had this experience once. I've been chanting japa for over 3 decades, and I feel like, sometimes I feel like I haven't progressed at all. When my mind is distracted, and it's certainly not like what I would hope, you know. And then one time I had this, I was kind of, I was at a weekend thing, something like this, and one thing that they did was they did this breathwork thing. And people were encouraging me to do it, and I was kind of, that's really not my thing, you know. I'm not into that. But they were close friends of mine, and so I said, okay, I'll do it. And it meant like lying down, and they were doing all these different kind of fast breathing, and they were also making you do things like you lie down, then you start to yell and scream and do all these different things. So it wasn't my thing, but I was going along with it and doing the best I could. And then, but what it did do was it put you in a bit of a different mental state. And then you were meant to lie down, and they were telling you like what to think about and so on. But when I was lying there, I was in a different mental state than I'm normally in. I was somewhere else. And then I was there for a long time. I don't know how long it was. Maybe it was 20 minutes or something like that. And then it occurred to me that without my thinking about it or trying, the entire time I had been chanting Maha Mantra in my mind. And I thought, well, this is very interesting, you know, that even though while I'm chanting, I may be inattentive, and even though I have no taste for that holy name, but somehow, just by chanting 16 rounds a day for so many years, this mantra has penetrated into my body and into my mind, into the vibration of my, you know, this whole setup here. And it felt like that those are like roots, you know, going into the ground. It's something's there. I'm not that person with that pure mind right now. I'm not that person with that deep spiritual attachment right now. I don't have that attachment for the holy name right now. But just by following the instructions of the great souls, chant these rounds. You know, even if I'm inattentive, I'm trying to follow. And even though my mind, you know, I'm not. You know, I'm no example of someone that was born into a pure family and given these kind of practices at a young age. I was exact opposite. But somehow, by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada's instructions and the mercy of the entire Guru Parampara, I'm following as best I can, or at least I'm giving it my heart on some level. And I have faith. You know, I have faith that it's not fruitless. It will, the day will come, and that day will come on Krishna's schedule, you know, when the Vaishnava or Krishna give that blessing, soften the heart, and the sprout really begins to manifest. Then that's on their schedule, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't know how many lifetimes I've built up all this conditioning. So this one little lifetime is really, as you get a little older, I'm probably much older than you now. As you get older, the life begins to look much shorter. And you begin to feel this sense of gratitude that hardly I'm giving anything. You know, to give this one life is a very small thing. And you know, even if this takes several lifetimes, that's okay too. You know? as long as I have that blessing that I can continue on the path, then that's fine too. And so maybe as you get a little older too, you'll begin to feel like, oh, this isn't, you know, the very sincere, and that's important. It's also good to feel like you're feeling too, like, I want it. It hasn't come yet. I want it. That's important too, that eagerness. But also, there may be a sense of feeling like just of gratitude that'll grow in your heart, that I've been given so much, and even if I have to live many lifetimes, as long as I'm in association of devotees, everything's perfect, and I'm in Krishna's hands, and everything's fine, and when Krishna gives that blessing, I'll get that blessing, and I'll just be very grateful. So I think your sentiments and your eagerness is wonderful, and I think Krishna will also bless you with different ways of feeling about how you're feeling. You'll feel both, something bittersweet, that feeling.
I want to say one thing.
Yes, please.
Thank you for bringing the question. I heard your seminar yesterday, and I don't know how many other devotees I speak for, but I'm very proud of you who have grown up in childhood Krishna consciousness and who have listened so attentively that the Guru Parampara just comes flowing out of you so naturally. And the songs that you sang with such devotion from your heart was definitely
It was just
not just no. It's not just impressive,
because you were there.
but it was
Because you were there.
it was really a revelation, and I would say life changing. So, thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Way in the back, Mataji.
I am, of course, inspired by everything that I really loved that soundbite of Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. And, we've heard it before and we know that we should do it daily.
You probably repeat.
Yes.
But an example came to my mind that if you don't have that minimum commitment, it's like if you do some wonderful sandcastle on the shore, the waves are going to come and wash it away. You won't be able to continue it the next day. But when you do something continually, you get a chance to build on what you did yesterday. So it reminded me of something that I heard from my Guru Maharaj, Bhakti Raksha Sridhar Maharaj. He said that everything has some tendency of spreading itself. So like if you engage in some bhakti, that will spread itself. And then if you don't engage in some bhakti, that will also spread itself. But I was thinking that what's really powerful is not just hearing these things, but hearing them in the association of devotees who are actually doing them. Because we're all going along in the world with basically our mind is our master. And it's kind of, if we're not in strong association, the mind can be sort of like a bully and take over. And when you're around strong devotees, the mind backs down. And it also
That's a takeaway right there. When you're around strong devotees, the mind backs down.
the bully backs down. And I also couldn't help but think that it's always been in the back of my mind that wow, there's this strong sangha of devotees in the Silicon Valley. But I think it's really powerful what Lord Nityananda made the Namahata. For devotees to travel. Because when devotees are in a spot, they're going to be dropping a lot of seeds. And the seeds are going to grow right there. And there's going to be a lot of seeds of growing trees right there. And that's going to be wonderful for that area. But if they, from time to time, move, they're going to spread seeds in new areas that wouldn't have otherwise gotten those seeds. And I think it's very powerful and wonderful. And I hope that this type of festival can spread more and more.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you, I never got your name. I've been so impressed to seeing your devotion, but
My name is Madhavi.
Madhavi Dasa, thank you. That was, I'm not going to be able to recap all that, but I think there are a few things that we have to grab onto. One was, you mentioned your Guru Maharaj, B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, mentioned about movement. Could you repeat that?
Everything spreads.
Everything spreads.
Everything has some tendency of spreading itself.
Everything has a tendency of spreading itself. And so therefore,
We always have a choice between something towards surrender or something towards listening to our mind.
okay,
Every time we make the choice to listen to our mind, we're going to have more of a tendency to do that more.
right.
And whenever we make the choice to surrender or do some seva, we're going to end up doing that more.
And then it's in the association of the strong devotees.
Then we're going to go in that direction because
The
we're going
ten-
to look at them and they're going to assert that you'll get this result.
Right.
I see this effulgence coming off of you. And I'm going to want to do what you're doing.
Beautiful. And so the tendency for the mind to spread in the wrong direction gets back down from that. It reminded me of one thought I've had. There's in the Yoga Sutras, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, very interesting book. Not exactly our Vaishnava Shastra, but so much of it runs very parallel with it. And he mentions there that how the fluctuations of the mind can be countered. And he says it can be done by the exact same thing Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. What is it? Abhyasa and Vairagya, right? By practice and detachment. And then he begins, and this is the way Patanjali and so many of these commentators have, the format that they use is then he goes to define both terms. What is practice? And so when he describes practice, he says something interesting. He says that when something is done with the right dedication or devotion, that's the first thing. When it's done over the course of a long time, and when it's done without interruption, which fits right into what we're saying about like Nityam Bhagavata Seva, when something's done regularly, steadily, daily. He says then that practice becomes firmly rooted. And I thought about that, and I thought, yeah, that's how we practice bhakti, right? We wanna do it steadily, and even like, for instance, we have a lot of asana practitioners here, and people that practice asana, they know. If I practice asana, like I can practice it intensely for 1 week, but then I don't pick it up for 2 weeks, and then I do it for 3 days in a row, like 5 hours a day. But then the next week I do it like a half an hour a day, and then it's better if they just did a little bit every single day and stayed steady, and then that practice becomes stronger, deeper, more firmly rooted. That's how things grow. Like we're talking about how things grow. Things need that kind of steady attention. And just as positive things grow like that, like a positive spiritual practice, negative things also grow like that. You know, that we have negative messages that repeat in our mind. Even just cultural things, like the way that we live now, our lifestyles now, they become more and more unnatural. Where it's like, I remember I was growing up, most of the families were like one income families, you know, and so you would come home and you'd have the family would eat together, you know, and there'd be a meal that was cooked, you know, with love and put on the table, and everyone would share together. And so if, like, say you're a kid and you're at school, and school is hard, it's rough, you're not getting along with other kids, you're fighting, you're having a hard time concentrating. If that doesn't get broken, it's going to become deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's going to create very negative impressions in the mind that will be hard to overcome. But if every day you sit down at the dinner table and you have a very positive, nourishing, not just physically nourishing, but like mentally or spiritually nourishing experience, and you feel loved, and your mind settles, then you're breaking that. You're breaking the pattern. You know, so I think we can understand our sadhana like this too, that even though we have to go into difficult situations and we live in unnatural lifestyles and so on, but we can break the negative patterns by practice, by every day bringing our sadhana to the forefront of our mind. And so not only is it reinforcing the positive things, but it's also cutting off the negative things. Those, as you say, like that, the mind is going to back down, right? Particularly, again, if we do it in the association of Vaishnavas that inspire us. And I believe the last point you made was the encouragement that we get together like this more. And so thank you very much for that. Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. So
There's no
I
mind.
feel that some people, enter, do the sadhana for 10 years. Some people might have done for 15 years. When the end of life is, somebody might have done for 1 year maybe.
Yeah.
In Ramayana, we hear about Shabari, who for years and years was waiting for Rama, and she was doing the sadhana.
Yeah.
And we also in Bhagavatam we have the story of Ajamil, who for a second, maybe nanosecond, just took the name of Narayana. I just want your perspective on, is it the power of association with that name, just the name alone for a nanosecond,
Okay.
which took him to Godhead?
Okay, so some people are doing sadhana for years and years and years and years. Some people we see, they just chanted the name once. So is this fair? Or how does it work? And for that we'll turn to Vaisesika.
Well, there are different perspectives. One, Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about the ways in which we accumulate bhakti unmukhi sukriti, which means spiritually based pious credits. We sometimes think of punya as good karma, but there's another kind of credit that we get when we associate with devotees, or when we do some devotional act. And there's a concept given in the Bhagavatam called Agyata Sukriti. Unknowingly, we may not have complete knowledge of how it's happening, but when we have association with devotees and we appreciate them, we do some service, we get a kind of a spiritual deposit. Prabhupada once said that the heart is like a bank, and you can make deposits in it, or withdrawals, obviously. The best kind of deposit is a spiritual deposit. And Brihatnaradya Purana, quoted in the Jaiva points out that when you get an accumulation enough, then Shraddha is born. It wakes up in your heart, which means you start to have an appreciation of bhakti. There's a story of Lal Babu, Jiva Goswami gives, where he's walking and he hears a mother calling out to a daughter and saying, now's the time. She was just calling her home. She should come in now. You come home. And he heard that. He was a businessman, very much absorbed in his enterprise. And when he heard it, the bhakti credits he already had in his heart fructified. And he thought, oh, that was for me. I should become dedicated to Lord Krishna. And he gave up his business occupation. He started going door to door as a beggar and collected. Now there's a temple in Vrindavan called the Lal Babu Temple. Beautiful deities there. So people accumulate this spiritually based, these credits, and then at a particular time they awaken as shraddha, or faith in the process. In the case of Ajamil, he was chanting the name of Krishna without any expectation. He was simply helpless. Ajamil was a dutiful young Brahmin, but he became derailed from his dharmic life at a particular at a young age. He was a youth and he became deviated, and then he spent the rest of his life in licentiousness. But then he named his son Narayan, and he was calling his son all the time, just as one would call a child. And so he built up, just by chanting the holy names, he was getting this very powerful purification. He went on committing sinful activities, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that it was like a snake with no fangs. It was like biting, but nothing happening. And then finally, when he was leaving his body, he saw the Yamadutas, very fearsome creatures coming to repossess not just his car, but everything else. And he became very fearful and called out for his son, because he was like, oh, Narayan. And only one time, saying that in a complete helplessness, it conflagrated. There was the power of the holy name is undeniable. It's there throughout the Bhagavatam, and all the great teachers agree, for instance, and this goes back to Devahuti, who says, Aho bata shvapachato gariyanya jiva gre vartate namatubhyam te pustapaste juhuvusasna arya brahmanatra nama grananti ete. Said how wonderful the holy name is, that even if somebody just one time, with the very tip of their tongue, like they've been Hare Krishna, and try it. Said that person who's able to say Hare Krishna, then they're known to have performed all pilgrimages, they've done all sacrifices in their previous life, done all the Vedic rituals, to come to this point of being able to say the holy name. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said they're not ordinary people who can say Hare Krishna. In fact, that person becomes eligible to perform Vedic sacrifices. So the holy name is all powerful, and especially at a certain time when somebody says it in a certain mood, then it will have all effect, but it always has some effect. Apana samsrutin goran, it says in the Bhagavatam that there's no difference between the name and Krishna himself. And so if you ever are in trouble, you should say Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
instead of whoa.
I think I need to leave in a few minutes, but maybe I could share just a couple of things in relation to what you said. Two things. One is the example of my dear friend Rogan. He's such a fascinating character. From his youth, he became a leader in a very weird punk rock world. But he brought into a very tamasic world these very like sattvic ideas of first straight edge, being free from drugs, and then vegetarianism, and then ultimately Krishna Bhakti. And he just had that determination and that charisma, and that, but really more than anything, the heart. You know, the heart to stand up and speak for what he thought was right, even though it was scary, even though it was dangerous, even though it was unpopular, even though he got a lot of flack for it. He gave his heart to serve people and ultimately to serve Krishna under all different kinds of circumstances. You know, it's a really unusual bhakti path, but you know, you get in a van and you drive to a city and you get on a stage and you start to glorify Krishna to a lot of people that don't want to hear it. You know, even they may want to like attack you. that was his life. And then, so he did that. He could have used his abilities to, I mean, rock stars, what they get, you know, money and fame and sex, and then he could have used it to pursue. It was all right in front of him. He could have taken all of that, but he decided, no, you know, I want to serve. I want to do what's right. I want to do what's good. I want to serve God. So he was doing that service, but of course that's like, it's hard to be a bhakti yogi in that world. And at a certain point, his path just got, you know, I don't know what the right way to phrase it, but he began to drift a little bit from the association of the devotees. And so he'll express that this was the darkest time of his life, where he's kind of like, he just wasn't so much practicing and wasn't so much associated with devotees. And if you look at it, like if a devotee looks back on it and he just became that same dynamic, incredible person, you know, spreading Krishna consciousness in all kind of dynamic, creative ways, and the same heart and everything. But it's interesting because now you look back, and he and I began this podcast a year and a half ago or so. We kicked it off on January 1st, 2020, and within the first, we were doing it for about a month, and we had about 900 listeners a day. And then we were together in Jaipur, and he got this text, and it was a text from Joe Rogan. It was this, basically Joe Rogan's podcast is probably the most important platform that anyone could speak on right now in media. It's like 10 million people will hear it, like that. And he got a text from Joe Rogan saying, will you please come on my show? And met in that dark time of his life, when he was practicing martial arts together. And he knew that this person was a yogi and had this yogic background, and it made him special, and he wanted to invite him on the show and hear about his yoga path. So 2 weeks later, we were back in the States, and he was on that show. Now that show, he just spoke about Bhagavad Gita. He spoke about his time in the ashram. He just spoke, he just shared his experience as being Prabhupada's follower and reading Bhagavad Gita and on how he understood it. And as far as I can understand, for one event, for one presentation in history, that was the biggest presentation of Bhagavad Gita or Bhakti ever. Right? One person in one sitting reaches 10 million people. I don't know if there's any other bigger, if there has ever been on any other bigger platform than that. And Krishna gave him that. And just as he's dedicated himself, whether it's in a little concert here or a big thing there or whatever, he did the same thing that he always does. He put his whole heart into it. He represented Guru Parampara. He presented Bhagavad Gita. And the next day, our listenership went from 900 to 10,000. Yeah, every day. And so now I look back at it and I say, well, that dark period that seems so dark, was Krishna not right there with him all the time? Was Krishna not like directing him, in everything that he was doing? Was Krishna not protecting him? And was he not right there in Krishna's heart as he was going through that time in his life? It might appear that he wasn't, but now it certainly appears that he was. So just like we were discussing before, there's so many things under the ground that we don't see. And perhaps what we miss, and this is one of the things that has really, through my daily reading of Bhagavatam, just has become at least theoretically clear to me, that one thing that I think I've never really understood enough is just how loving and merciful and kind Krishna is. And so when we look at the story of Ajamil, the way that I understand that is that Vyasadeva wanted to highlight just how kind and merciful Krishna is. That even though he did everything that he deserved to go to hell, and the Yamadutas were right there ready to drag him to hell, and they practically had the ropes around his soul, and they were pulling him out, and they felt entirely justified to do so, and they had their whole reasoning why it was justified. And out of nowhere come the servants of Lord Vishnu, and they're these beautiful, effulgent beings, and they won't allow it to happen. But they're like, well, why not? It all adds up. He's ours now. Right. And they're like, no. And there's nothing that the Yamadutas could do, right? To show just, every time we see Lord Vishnu appear in the Bhagavatam, he's kind, he's soft, he's smiling, and he's benedicting everyone. Like not just like one person. He's when he appears. When the four Kumars are cursing Jai and Vijay, he's benedicting the four Kumars. They're getting their first personal association to see and to smell and to experience the form of Lord Vishnu. But he's also there. In his heart, he's come to protect Jai and Vijay. And then even when he kills Jai and Vijay again and again and again, right? He's not only protecting Prahlad or saving the Vedas or protecting the earth, but he's actually benedicting those demons, right, who are actually his devotees. So he always comes and he's got a beautiful smile on his face. And just to see him, he's not angry, he's not vengeful, he's not cruel, he's not like this God of justice in that sense, but he's the God of mercy. And so that pastime with the Jamil is, the way that I understand it, it's like, don't you get it? Don't you get just how any little thing that we do, particularly in terms of the holy name, he's just waiting for the excuse to come and benedict us and save us. I don't think Jai Shri ever came. Oh, okay, Jai Shri, I just wanted to thank you so much. This whole weekend you have been running non-stop. This is what selfless service looks like. When you put aside all of your own comforts, you take on all the anxiety, and you just know that I'm going to run and run and run and run and run and run to serve the devotees. And I see it. It's amazing. I see it as when I served my guru. It was kind of like you had no independence. You just had to completely give yourself 100%. But even then, it was like he was going to get on my case real heavy if I didn't, you know. But you're just running around and doing it out of the own, you know, love of your heart. And
It really wasn't all me. I mean,
I know that. I know there's others that I'm not seeing, but I'm seeing it in you, so I'm sharing that. Yeah.
You know, it was very visible. Unlimited.
I'm sure there are. And I want to thank everyone, you know, everyone that helped put this event together. Thank you so much for the wonderful dedication to create this project, which is Ramdas Prabhu. Thank you so much, and everybody that works here with you. This is something very special, something very beautiful. It's not easy to create projects like this. It takes tons of work and dedication and money and effort and cooperation. You know, you have to give up your ego to work with other people to make it work. All these things are hard. So I really thank you all, and I also thank everybody that came. It was wonderful to see you, as I said, you know, seeing old friends, making new friends, connecting. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Vaisesika, so much for coming. It was so wonderful.
And especially to Kaustubha Prabhu and Raghunath Prabhu, who have dedicated every day of their life. And it's not just the morning times, they're thinking about it 24/7 and planning for it and how to expand the Bhagavatam everywhere. Thank you for all that you do, for walking the earth.
Keep on